Fear is a force that grips us, immobilizes us, and holds us captive in ways we barely recognize. It whispers in our ears, convincing us to stay small, to avoid risks, and to retreat from the challenges that life inevitably throws at us. And yet, fear is also a liar. It masks itself as protection, as prudence, as wisdom, but in truth, it is often none of these things. It is a shackle, not a shield. And so I say this: stop living in fear. When we allow fear to dictate our actions, we shrink the world around us. We convince ourselves that safety is found in avoidance, that success comes from never making mistakes, and that happiness lies in staying within the confines of our comfort zones. But let me tell you something: there is no comfort in a life dictated by fear. It is a slow, insidious erosion of your potential, your courage, and your capacity to engage meaningfully with the world. You think about the things you fear most. They often have less to do with actual danger and more to do with uncertainty. Fear thrives in the unknown. It thrives in ambiguity, in the spaces where the outcome isn't guaranteed. But here's the irony: life itself is uncertain. It always has been, and it always will be. To live is to step into the unknown every single day. The question is not whether you will face uncertainty, but whether you will. Fear is often seen as a natural instinct, an internal warning system designed to protect us from harm. But in reality, it functions in ways that are not always as clear-cut as that. At its core, fear presents itself as a protector, a voice telling us that we need to be cautious, that we should retreat or avoid certain situations to ensure our survival. However, this very instinct, while helpful in certain circumstances, can deceive us into making decisions that are not in our best interest. Fear doesn't always reflect the actual threat in front of us. Instead, it amplifies perceived risks, distorting them to such an extent that we begin to believe we are in immediate danger when in fact we are not. Consider how fear often manifests when we're about to do something new or unfamiliar. It tells us, don't take that step, it could go wrong, you might fail, you might be judged. This fear, however, doesn't acknowledge the fact that failure is not the end, nor is it a permanent condition. Failure is often a stepping stone to growth, learning, and greater success. The fear of failure distorts the process of growth itself, painting the risk as insurmountable rather than an opportunity to learn and adapt. It tells us to hold back, not to try, or to settle for the familiar rather than taking a chance that might lead to new experiences and possibilities. In the same way, fear can make us overly cautious, convincing us that we must remain in our comfort zones, avoiding risks at all costs. But this is precisely where fear becomes a liar. It convinces us that by staying within the confines of what we know, we are safe. It encourages us to minimize change, to avoid challenges, and to keep things predictable. But when we shrink our world to avoid discomfort, we inadvertently limit our potential. We shut down opportunities for personal development, for innovation, and for deeper connections with others. Fear tells us that sticking to the status quo is the safest bet, but in reality, it's often the path of least growth. Furthermore, fear distorts our perception of what is truly dangerous and what is not. Take public speaking, for example. For many people, the mere thought of speaking in front of others fills them with terror. The fear of judgment, of being exposed as incompetent, can feel overwhelming. However, in most cases, these fears are based on imagined scenarios. What if people laugh? What if I forget my words? The truth is, the risk of something truly disastrous happening is extremely low. And yet, fear magnifies this risk in a way that can paralyze us. It convinces us that it's better to avoid the challenge altogether, even though the reality of overcoming that fear could lead to personal empowerment and growth. The key to overcoming this deceptive nature of fear lies in understanding its role, not as a guard at the gates of danger, but as a barrier to our own potential. Fear often arises when we face something new or uncertain, but rather than acting as a safeguard, it often signals an opportunity to grow. When we recognize this, we can begin to view fear differently, not as something to be avoided, but as a signal that we are stepping outside our comfort zones and into the realm of personal transformation. The challenge, then, is not to eliminate fear altogether. It will always be there in some form, but to not let it dictate our actions. We must learn to question the messages fear sends, examining whether the perceived dangers are real or exaggerated. By understanding that fear's main role is often to protect us from failure, discomfort, or uncertainty, we can begin to take calculated risks, confront our anxieties, and step into the unknown with a sense of empowerment rather than hesitation. The things we fear the most often point us directly to areas in our lives that are ripe for growth. Fear, when examined closely, is not simply a response to danger, but rather an indicator of places where we have room to evolve. It is easy to assume that fear arises solely from real threats or challenges, but in many cases, the very presence of fear signals that we are about to step into something that could lead to personal transformation. In this sense, fear is not our enemy, but a messenger one that tells us where we are likely to experience the most profound growth. When we approach something new, whether it's a new job, a new relationship, or a new project, fear often surfaces. This fear arises not because the situation is inherently dangerous, but because it involves stepping into the unknown. The unfamiliarity of a situation can trigger a fear response as our minds attempt to assess the risks, often exaggerating the potential for failure or discomfort. But what fear fails to tell us is that growth rarely occurs within the confines of the familiar. It is precisely when we are pushed out of our comfort zones that we develop new skills, adapt to new environments, and build the resilience necessary to navigate the challenges of life. Consider, for instance, the fear of public speaking. For many people, this fear is one of the most common and overwhelming anxiety. The thought of speaking in front of an audience, of being exposed to judgment and criticism, is enough to make even the most accomplished individuals feel vulnerable. However, the act of facing this fear head-on often leads to significant personal development. As we practice and improve our public speaking skills, we not only gain confidence in our ability to communicate effectively, but we also learn to manage anxiety, handle criticism, and refine our self-expression. This process of confronting and overcoming fear, while uncomfortable, ultimately leads to growth that could not be achieved without the initial fear itself. In the same way, fear of failure can be one of the most powerful forces holding us back from achieving our potential. Many individuals avoid taking risks or pursuing their dreams because they fear that failure will define them. Yet, failure is not a final judgment of who we are or what we are capable of. In fact, failure is often the best teacher we can have. It provides invaluable lessons, offering insights into what works and what doesn't, helping us adjust our approach and refine our strategies. The process of overcoming failure builds resilience, determination, and adaptability traits that are essential for long-term success. Fear of failure, therefore, does not need to be avoided but embraced as an opportunity to develop these critical life skills. Another area where fear reveals potential for growth is in our personal relationships. Fear of vulnerability and rejection can prevent us from forming deep connections with others. We may hold back from sharing our true selves, from expressing our emotions, or from taking the necessary steps to build meaningful bonds. But it is precisely by confronting this fear, by being vulnerable and authentic, that we develop intimacy and trust. The ability to open up to others, despite the fear of rejection, allows us to experience the richness of human connection. And while there is always the possibility of being hurt, the growth that comes from allowing ourselves to be seen for who we truly are is immeasurable. Fear, when recognized as a catalyst for growth, can be reframed from an obstacle into a powerful force for change. Rather than avoiding the things that scare us, we can choose to face them, knowing that the discomfort we feel in the moment is a sign that we are pushing past old limitations and expanding our capacities. The fear of the unknown, of failure, of judgment, these are not signals to retreat, but invitations to step into new possibilities, to transform ourselves and our lives in ways we might not have imagined. By embracing our fears and understanding them as opportunities for growth, we open ourselves to a richer, more fulfilling existence. Life is inherently uncertain. From the moment we are born, we are thrust into a world full of unknowns, unpredictabilities, and surprises. Every day we navigate this uncertainty, whether we're making decisions about our careers, our relationships, or our personal well-being. Fear, in many ways, thrives in the spaces where there is uncertainty. It amplifies our worries and paints worst-case scenarios, often leading us to avoid situations or opportunities simply because we cannot foresee the outcome. However, when we learn to accept uncertainty as a fundamental part of life, we can begin to use it to our advantage rather than allowing fear to paralyze us. The unknown is unsettling, and fear feeds on this discomfort. When we don't know what will happen next, our brains naturally default to imagining negative possibilities. Will I succeed in this new job? Will this relationship work out? What if I fail in front of others? These questions may seem innocuous, but they are often fueled by a deep fear of uncertainty. Our minds desperately want to predict the future because doing so makes us feel in control. But the truth is that control is an illusion. The future will always be uncertain, and trying to predict it with any degree of certainty is both futile and limiting. The only certainty we can rely on is the fact that uncertainty will continue to exist. What if, instead of viewing uncertainty as something to fear, we saw it as an opportunity? Uncertainty brings the possibility of growth and transformation, because it is only in the unknown that we encounter new experiences, new challenges, and new possibilities. Every great achievement, every breakthrough, every step forward has occurred because someone embraced uncertainty and faced it head on. Think about the great innovators and leaders of history. They did not avoid uncertainty. They leaned into it, took risks, and made choices without knowing what the exact outcome would be. The very essence of progress, whether in technology, art, or science, is built on the willingness to step into the unknown and learn through trial and error. Accepting uncertainty allows us to be more adaptable and resilient. When we stop obsessing over controlling every detail and predicting every outcome, we open ourselves to the possibility that things may turn out differently, perhaps even better than we initially imagined. Embracing uncertainty means that we can adjust our approach, learn from setbacks, and keep moving forward, regardless of how unpredictable the journey may be. This mindset empowers us to take on challenges that we might otherwise shy away from. We no longer need to wait for the perfect conditions or the right guarantees before making a move. Instead, we recognize that the process itself, filled with its uncertainties and risks, is where the true value lies. Moreover, when we learn to embrace uncertainty, we free ourselves from the paralyzing grip of fear. Fear thrives in a climate of rigid expectations and the desperate need for control. But once we accept that life is fluid and that we cannot predict or control everything, we relieve ourselves from the constant pressure to make the right choices or avoid the wrong ones. Instead of trying to prevent uncertainty from entering our lives, we begin to see it as an essential part of living fully. Life becomes richer when we let go of the illusion of certainty and embrace the journey, wherever it may lead. It's important to note that uncertainty does not mean recklessness. It does not mean making decisions without considering the risks or taking chances without preparation. Rather, it means acknowledging that no matter how much we plan, how much we prepare, or how much we worry, we cannot control every factor. What we can control is how we respond to uncertainty. We can choose to embrace it with curiosity, courage, and resilience. Rather than allowing it to overwhelm us with fear, we can approach it as an invitation to grow, to explore new opportunities, and to expand our capabilities. In the end, uncertainty is not something to fear, it is something to embrace. It is the fertile ground in which creativity, growth, and transformation take root. The more we allow ourselves to live with the unknown, the more we begin to thrive in it. We learn to trust ourselves, our abilities, and our capacity to navigate the challenges that arise. The unknown is not a threat, it is a doorway to endless possibilities. And when we walk through that door with open eyes and an open heart, we find that the journey itself, full of uncertainty and wonder, is where the true magic happens. When we encounter fear, we often see it as a roadblock, a force that tells us to turn back or avoid certain situations altogether. However, if we take a moment to reflect, we begin to realize that fear, while uncomfortable, often holds the key to some of the most transformative moments in our lives. The things we fear most often signal areas where we have the potential to grow. It is through confronting these fears that we step into new opportunities, expand our skills, and push the boundaries of who we are and what we can become. Take, for example, the fear of failure. It is one of the most common fears people experience, and yet it is also one of the greatest opportunities for growth. Many of us avoid taking risks or stepping outside our comfort zones because we fear failing, whether it's failing at a new project, failing in our careers, or failing in relationships. The prospect of failure often feels unbearable, and so we hesitate or avoid situations where failure might occur. But here's the truth: failure is not a reflection of our worth or our abilities. Rather, it is a necessary part of the growth process. Every successful person has experienced failure, often many times. Failure teaches us lessons that success cannot. It shows us what doesn't work, it builds resilience, and it forces us to reassess our approaches and strategies. Without failure, there can be no learning, no innovation, and no improvement. The fear of failure, therefore, is not something to avoid, but something to embrace as an opportunity to refine our skills, adapt to challenges, and ultimately grow stronger. Similarly, our fear of judgment often prevents us from being our authentic selves. Whether in social situations, at work, or in creative endeavors, the fear of being judged by others can be overwhelming. We worry about how others perceive us, and in doing so, we suppress parts of ourselves, our ideas, our creativity, and even our emotions. Yet it is precisely by facing this fear of judgment that we create the space for authenticity and self-expression. When we allow ourselves to step into situations where judgment is a possibility, we give ourselves permission to be real, to take risks, and to show up fully. This is where true personal growth happens. It is in embracing vulnerability that we build deeper connections with others, foster trust, and find the courage to share our true selves. The fear of judgment may always exist, but it is not something that should dictate our actions. By facing this fear, we open ourselves to more meaningful and genuine interactions. Fear can also point us toward areas of personal strength and resilience that we didn't even know we had. Consider the fear we often feel when facing new challenges or unfamiliar environments. Whether it's taking on a new job, moving to a new city, or stepping into a leadership role. The unknown can be intimidating. But when we face these fears, we often uncover new talents, abilities, and resources that we never realized we possessed. The process of confronting fear forces us to tap into our inner reserves, our creativity, resourcefulness, and determination, and by doing so, we grow in ways that we might have thought impossible. Each time we push ourselves to face something that scares us, we expand our boundaries and learn just how much we are capable of achieving. Furthermore, fear is not only a guide to personal development, but also a reminder that we are alive and engaged in the world. It's easy to slip into a routine, to live on autopilot, and to avoid taking risks or challenging ourselves. But when fear appears, it signals that we are on the brink of something new, something significant, something that will push us to grow. Fear shows us that we are stepping outside of our comfort zones and into a space where transformation is possible. Rather than seeing fear as something negative or debilitating, we can choose to see it as an invitation to expand, to become more than we were yesterday. The truth is, growth does not happen in the absence of fear. It happens when we confront fear, understand it, and move forward despite it. The most profound moments of growth in our lives often come from the very experiences that frighten us the most. It is through facing our fears that we learn more about who we are, what we can do, and what we are capable of achieving. Fear, in this sense, becomes a companion on our journey of self-discovery, an essential part of the process of becoming who we are meant to be. By embracing fear, we open ourselves to a world of possibilities, one where growth is not only possible but inevitable. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to act in spite of it. Often, when we think of courage, we imagine moments of great heroism or triumph over seemingly insurmountable challenges. We envision the soldier on the battlefield, the activist standing up for a cause, or the individual overcoming life-threatening situations. However, courage is not always about grand gestures or extraordinary feats. It is a quiet, daily practice, the decision to continue moving forward despite the fears that inevitably arise in our lives. The notion that courage means being fearless is a misconception. Fear is a natural and unavoidable part of the human experience. It is a primal response designed to protect us from danger and help us navigate the world. But while fear serves a purpose, it is also a powerful force that can hold us back if we allow it to dictate our actions. Courage, then, is not about eliminating fear. It is about learning to move forward in the presence of fear, to take the next step even when uncertainty looms large. Each day we face numerous decisions and challenges that evoke fear in some form. It might be the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, or the fear of the unknown. Regardless of the specific fear, the key is to understand that acting courageously does not require the absence of fear. It simply requires the willingness to move despite it. This is where the practice of courage comes in, through small, consistent actions that help us face our fears and expand our comfort zones. Courage is built through repetition. It is in the small, everyday decisions where we practice being courageous. For instance, consider the fear we feel when speaking up in a meeting or voicing an unpopular opinion. The fear of being judged or ridiculed can be paralyzing, and it may tempt us to stay silent or avoid putting ourselves out there. But each time we push past that fear and speak our truth, we build courage. The next time we are faced with a similar situation, we are better equipped to act in spite of the fear. Courage is not a one-time act. It is a cumulative process that becomes stronger the more we engage with it. Similarly, courage is required when we face setbacks or failures. It is easy to become discouraged when things don't go according to plan, and the fear of failing again can prevent us from trying altogether. However, courage does not mean avoiding failure. It means persevering in the face of it. Each time we fail and choose to keep going, we build resilience and inner strength. Courage allows us to view failure not as an end, but as part of the learning process. It empowers us to get back up, adjust our approach, and keep moving forward with greater wisdom and determination. The process of building courage also involves confronting the fear of judgment. Many of us hold back from pursuing our dreams or expressing our true selves because we fear what others will think. The desire for approval or acceptance can be so strong that it prevents us from living authentically. But courage is about embracing vulnerability and daring to be ourselves, regardless of how others may perceive us. Every time we act in alignment with our values, regardless of external judgment, we strengthen our courage. We begin to trust ourselves more deeply and become more comfortable with the idea that not everyone will agree with us. And that's okay. As we continue to practice courage, we also begin to notice a shift in our mindset. Rather than seeing fear as something to avoid or eliminate, we start to view it as a sign that we are growing. Fear signals that we are stepping outside our comfort zones, trying something new, or challenging ourselves in some way. Rather than shrinking away from fear, we lean into it, knowing that on the other side lies growth, self-discovery, and a deeper sense of empowerment. Courage is a muscle that requires regular exercise. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't come easily. But the more we practice it, the stronger and more resilient we become. We begin to trust ourselves and our abilities more. And we start to see fear not as a barrier, but as a signal that we're on the right path. With each small, courageous act, we build the foundation for greater achievements and a more fulfilling life. In the end, courage is not about being fearless, it is about being willing to act despite fear. It is about choosing to move forward, to take risks, and to keep going even when the path is uncertain. Through consistent practice, courage becomes a part of who we are. It becomes the lens through which we view the world, empowering us to live fully and authentically, knowing that fear is simply a companion on the journey to becoming our best selves.